In 2500 BCE, in the dry heat of Upper Egypt, servants fanned wet clay jars to keep food from spoiling. We know this because the paintings survive. Frescoes on tomb walls, dated to the Old Kingdom, show porous vessels being cooled by evaporation. That was 4,500 years ago. In the late 1990s, a Nigerian schoolteacher named Mohammed Bah Abba took 2 terracotta pots, one smaller than the other, nested them together, packed wet sand between them, and covered the top with a damp cloth. Fresh tomatoes that rotted in 2 days lasted 21 days. Eggplants that lasted 3 days lasted 27. He produced 5,000 units, then scaled to 30,000 a year. He distributed over 100,000 of these devices to families across northern Nigeria. Each one cost roughly 200 naira. That is about $1.30. In the year 2000, Rolex gave him $75,000 through their awards. For enterprise, in 2001 he won the World Shell Award for Sustainable Development. The University of Jos conducted studies confirming the results across multiple produce types. Peer-reviewed, documented, awarded. You were never told. Americans lose over $4.5 billion in food every year during power outages. The USDA's official guidance is to throw everything in your refrigerator away after 4 hours without power. 4 hours. And the device that keeps produce cold for 21 days without a single watt of electricity costs less than a cup of coffee. But no corporation on earth profits when you build one from 2 clay pots and sand. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to build a pot-in-pot refrigerator. You will understand the 4,500-year-old physics that make it work, and you will never again be completely helpless when the grid goes down. The answer starts 4,500 years ago in a place you would not expect. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, understand what we do. We find knowledge that works, knowledge that has been tested not by a marketing department, but by centuries of human survival, knowledge that powerful industries have no incentive to teach you and every incentive to bury. We do not wait for permission to learn what works. We do not ask a corporation whether their competitor, a $2 clay pot, deserves your attention. We find it, we verify it, we hand it to you. If that sounds like something your feed needs more of, subscribe now. Not for entertainment, for information that could matter when the lights go out, because the algorithm buries what you do not engage with, and this kind of content disappears from your recommendations. Unless you tell it, you want it. Let us go back to where this knowledge began. 2500 BCE, Egypt, the Old Kingdom. The Nile Delta is fertile, but the air is punishing. Daytime temperatures exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit for months. There is no ice. There is no mechanical cooling. There is clay, water, and wind. And that is enough. Egyptian artisans shape porous jars. Servants wet them and fan the surface. The water seeps through the clay, meets the dry air, and evaporates. Every molecule of water that transitions from liquid to gas pulls heat energy from the vessel. The contents stay cool. Not modern refrigerator cold, but cool enough. Cool enough to preserve food. Cool enough to keep water drinkable. This is not mythology. This is documented in tomb frescoes that archaeologists have photographed and catalogued. Now jumps forward. Across the Arabian Peninsula and into Persia, the same principle appears independently. Arabic-speaking cultures developed the Zeer and the Kuala, dedicated evaporative cooling vessels with names, traditions, and refinements, passed down across generations. The Persians take it further. They build wind catchers, tall architectural towers, designed to channel dry air over water. They dig qanats, underground aqueducts that move cool water across miles of desert. An entire civilization's infrastructure built around the physics of evaporation. No electricity, no compressor. No refrigerant gas, just water, clay, and airflow. Now jump again. 19th century. The Australian outback. Gold miners and settlers face blistering heat and no supply chain for ice. They build what they call the Coolgardie Safe. It is a wooden cabinet wrapped in hessian cloth with its legs sitting in trays of water. The cloth wicks moisture upward. The dry Australian air evaporates it. The interior stays cool enough to store butter, meat, and milk. Different continent, different century, different culture, same physics. One more jump. 1930s, the United States, the Great Depression. Millions of Americans lose access to electric refrigeration, not because the technology does not exist, but because they cannot afford the electricity. What do? They revert. Root cellars, spring houses, wet cloth cooling, passive evaporation. Within living memory, Americans use the same principle that Egyptians painted on their walls 4,500 years earlier. So if this technology worked across 4 continents for 4.5 millennia, what happened? Why did it disappear from common knowledge? Before I answer that, I want to tell you about the vault. What you're watching right now is the surface. One device, one application. But behind this channel is a growing research library of survival knowledge that has been displaced, suppressed, or simply forgotten. Food preservation methods that do not require electricity, water purification techniques that cost pennies, off-grid medical applications that predate the pharmaceutical industry by centuries, shelter strategies, fermentation science, seed saving, firecraft, no fluff, no filler, every entry sourced, cited, and built for practical use. If you want access to the full archive, the link is in the description. But stay right here, because this video gives you everything you need to build and use the Zeer pot. And before you build one, you need to understand the science, because the science is what makes this impossible for anyone to dismiss. Here is how it works. You already know the mechanism. You experience it every day. When you step out of a swimming pool on a hot day, your skin feels cold. That is not because the air is cold. It is because the water on your skin is evaporating, and evaporation absorbs heat. The technical term is the latent heat of vaporization. Every gram of water that transitions from liquid to gas absorbs roughly 540 calories of thermal energy from the surface it is leaving. Your skin cools, the clay pot cools, same physics, same law, no exceptions. The University of Jos in Plateau State, Nigeria, confirmed this under controlled conditions. Researchers tested the pot-in-pot system across multiple produce types. Tomatoes stored without refrigeration lasted 2 days before spoiling. Inside the Zeer pot, they lasted 21 days. Eggplants went from 3 days to 27. Peppers and leafy greens showed similar extensions. The interior temperature of the pot dropped to a range of 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit in arid conditions, a 30 to 40 degree Fahrenheit reduction from ambient temperature. The FDA's threshold for safe cold food storage is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The Zeer pot, in optimal conditions, reaches that zone or comes within striking distance of it. Mohammed Bah Abba was not an engineer. He was a teacher. He saw that girls in rural Nigerian communities spent their days sitting in the market, trying to sell produce before it rotted in the heat. They could not go to school because the food would spoil if they left. He built the pot-in-pot cooler, tested it, refined it, and began distributing it. The $75,000 Rolex Award prize, he reinvested it into production. More pots, more families, more girls in school. 3 variables govern performance: humidity. The drier the air, the faster the evaporation, and the greater the cooling. Airflow. Moving air carries away moisture and accelerates the process. And porosity. The clay must be unglazed and porous enough to wick water from the sand to the outer surface. That is it. No compressor, no chemical refrigerant, no circuit board, no moving parts. Now, remember that the global refrigerator market exceeds $100 billion annually. The Zeer pot costs $2. It cannot be patented. It requires no replacement parts, no electricity, no service contract, and no subscription. So it is proven, it is awarded, it is deployed at scale. Now, let us talk about why you have never heard of it. In the 1920s and 30s, companies like General Electric, Frigidaire, and Kelvinator launched massive advertising campaigns positioning electric refrigeration as the hallmark of modern civilization. If you had an electric refrigerator, you were modern. If you did not, you were backward. This was not subtle. These were national campaigns in magazines, newspapers, and early radio. The message was clear. Progress means buying the appliance. And it worked. Within a single generation, an entire ecosystem of overlapping food preservation skills, root cellaring, smoking, salting, canning, drying, fermentation, and passive cooling, atrophied. Not because they stopped working, because they stopped being taught. The knowledge did not vanish because it was disproven. It vanished because it was displaced by a product. Now look at the numbers. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reports that major power outages have increased 67% between the year 2000 and 23. 3.5 million Americans lose power in any given week. The total annual cost of power outages in the United States exceeds $150 billion. And buried inside that number is $4.5 billion in food spoilage alone, according to USDA estimates. Here is what should bother you. FEMA publishes preparedness guides. The USDA publishes food safety guidance. Neither one mentions the Zeer pot. Neither one mentions pot-in-pot cooling. Neither one mentions any form of passive evaporative food preservation. The official advice is to buy ice, buy a generator, or throw your food away. A $2 device validated by peer-reviewed research and international awards that keeps produce cold for 3 weeks. And it appears in 0 federal preparedness guidance. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is an observable fact. The off-grid alternatives the market does offer you: propane refrigerators run $200 to $500. Solar-powered fridges start around $800 and run up to $1,500. That is a 50 times to 500 times cost differential compared to the Zeer pot. And every one of those alternatives requires fuel, batteries, replacement parts, or technical maintenance. The Zeer pot requires water and sand. Think about what that means for the business model. A customer who builds a Zeer pot is a customer lost, permanently. No recurring revenue, no replacement cycle, no service plan, no upsell. The $2 clay pot is not just cheap. It is an economic threat to every company in the cold chain. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Someone who does not accept the default answers. Someone who checks the sources. Someone who understands that what you're not taught matters as much as what you are. Hit subscribe. Share this video with one person who loses food when the power goes out. That is not a marketing ask. That is how this knowledge survives. The algorithm does not promote what people do not engage with, and this kind of content disappears from your feed if you do not tell the system you want it. Now, honesty. This device has limits, and you need to know every one of them before you depend on it. The Zeer pot works best in hot, dry climates. If your relative humidity is consistently above 50 to 60%, and that includes the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, Florida, and much of the tropics, the evaporation rate drops dramatically. Instead of a 30 to 40 degree Fahrenheit temperature reduction, you may get 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Enough to help. Not enough to reach the FDA's 40 degree Fahrenheit safe zone. This device is not a refrigerator replacement for meat, dairy, eggs, or cooked leftovers. Those foods require consistent temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Zeer pot cannot guarantee that in variable conditions. This is a produce preservation tool. Fruits, vegetables, some grains, and herbs. That is its lane, and it is extraordinary in that lane, but do not stretch it beyond what the science supports. Water. Consumption is real. You will use several liters per day to keep the sand saturated depending on heat and wind. In a water-scarce scenario, that is a genuine trade-off you must plan for. Terracotta quality varies. Not every pot will work. I will tell you how to test yours in the build instructions. There is no thermostat, no alarm, no failsafe. You monitor it yourself. You check the sand. You re-wet on schedule. This is active, hands-on preservation. It works, but it requires your attention. Now that you know what it can and cannot do, here is exactly how to build one. Materials: 2 unglazed terracotta pots. The inner pot should be 2 to 3 inches smaller in diameter than the outer pot. Both must be unglazed. No shiny coating, no sealant, no paint. You need clean sand, enough to fill the gap between the two pots and create a 1-inch base layer. You need water. You need a damp cloth or burlap to cover the top. You need a small piece of cork, clay, or waterproof tape to seal the drainage hole in the inner pot. Total cost, $2 to $4 if you source pots locally, up to $10 to $15 in the United States from a garden center. Step 1. Seal the drainage hole in the inner pot. You do not want water seeping into the food chamber. Use cork, a clay plug, food-safe silicone, or waterproof tape. The outer pot's drainage hole stays open or can be optionally sealed depending on your setup. Some builders leave it open to let excess water drain. Step 2. Test your pots for porosity. Splash water on the exterior of the outer pot. If it absorbs within seconds and the surface darkens, the clay is porous enough. If the water beads up and rolls off, the pot is glazed or sealed and will not work. Step 3. Place a 1-inch layer of sand in the bottom of the outer pot. Step 4. Set the inner pot inside the outer pot, centered, so the rims are roughly level. Step 5. Fill the gap between the two pots with sand, packing it gently but not too tightly. Leave about 1/2 inch of space below the rim. Step 6. Pour water slowly into the sand until it is fully saturated. You will see the water level rise and then absorb. Keep adding until the sand cannot hold any more. Step 7. Place your produce inside the inner pot. Best performers include tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, carrots, okra, leafy greens, and citrus. Step 8. Cover the top with a damp cloth or wet burlap. This adds an additional evaporative surface and keeps insects out. Step 9. Place the assembly in a shaded, well-ventilated area, not in direct sunlight, not indoors in a closed room. You need airflow across the outer surface. A shaded porch, an open-air shed, or under a tree all work. Re-wet the sand and cloth at least twice daily. In extreme heat, above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, check every 8 hours. The sand must stay saturated for the physics to function. Ideal conditions are 85 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit ambient. Temperature with relative humidity below 40%. In those conditions, the interior will reach 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the sweet spot. That is where tomatoes last 21 days. And here is something almost nobody mentions. Mohammed Bah Abba adapted this technology for medical use. In Eritrea, Zeer pots were used to preserve insulin in communities with no electricity and no cold chain. A $2 clay pot, keeping medicine viable in a desert. That is not a footnote. That is a revelation about what this device truly represents. Step back and think about what you just learned. A technology documented in Egyptian tomb paintings from 2500 BCE, independently developed by Persians, Arabs, Australian settlers, and Depression-era Americans, validated by a Nigerian university with peer-reviewed research, honored with international awards, deployed to 100,000 households, capable of extending the shelf life of fresh produce from 2 days to 21 days, legal everywhere, available everywhere, requiring no electricity, no fuel, no moving parts, and no specialized skill. It costs less than a cup of coffee, and 99% of the developed world has never heard of it. The only reason you did not know is that no one profits when you build it. A $2 unpatentable device that competes with a $100 billion industry does not get featured in FEMA guides. It does not show up in USDA recommendations. It does not appear in the back-to-school science curriculum. It sits in the space between what is known and what is taught, and that space is not empty. It is filled with money. Mohammed Bah Abba died in 2010. He never became wealthy. He never built a corporation. What he did was free thousands of girls from sitting in markets all day watching tomatoes rot and send them to school instead. He proved that a $2 device could do what a $500 appliance does, and he gave the design away. You now hold that design. You know how to build it, you know the science behind it, you know its limits, you know its history, and you know exactly why no one handed you this information before today. Share this video. Not for me, not for the channel, because this knowledge only survives if it moves. Every person who learns to build a Zeer pot is one more person who is not helpless when the power goes out. One more family that does not throw away a refrigerator full of food because a storm knocked out the grid for 2 days. Next week, we open the vault on another piece of displaced survival technology, one that purifies water without boiling, without filters, and without chemicals. It has been proven, it has been buried, and you're going to learn exactly how it works. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay dangerous.